My name is Soleil Achebi. I'm 32 years old. And the Tuesday night I received a banking alert for a dinner I hadn't been invited to was when I finally understood that I had been funding a version of my family that I was not a part of. The notification came at 9:47 p.m. A charge of $312.44 on the joint card, the one I had set up 3 years earlier and funded monthly from my own checking account, the one my parents used for household expenses, and occasionally for things that were not household expenses, and occasionally for things I found out about later from the statement rather than from them. The merchant name was Terrazza, a mid-range Italian restaurant on the east side of my parents' neighborhood that I had been to twice, both times for occasions that included me. I opened Instagram before I opened the account. I don't know why, instinct, maybe, or the particular way bad information tends to arrive in clusters. My mother's profile was the third one I checked. She had posted 40 minutes earlier. The photo showed 7 people around a table at what I recognized from the pendant lights and the dark wood paneling as terrazzo. Candles.
Wine.
My father at the head of the table, my mother beside him, my brother Kwame and his wife Petra, my mother's sister Adiz's husband Lionel, and my grandmother, who was 81 and who had been, according to a phone call I'd received 2 weeks earlier, too tired for visitors. I was not in the photograph. I was not tagged. I was not mentioned in the caption, which read, "So grateful for this family. These people are everything. Red heart." I scrolled through the photo twice. I counted the faces twice. I put my phone face down on my kitchen counter and stood there with my hands flat on the surface and my eyes on the window above the sink, which showed the dark outline of the building across the alley and 2 lit windows and nothing else. I stood there for a moment that was neither short nor long, the kind of moment that has a specific weight to it, like the pause before a system finishes loading. Then I picked my phone back up. I forwarded myself the banking notification. I opened the account management portal. I looked at the card settings for approximately 4 minutes. What none of them knew, what my mother had apparently not considered when she posted a photograph of 7 family members at a dinner funded by an AIDS, was that the card had a primary account holder, and that account holder had a password, and the password was mine. I went to bed without making any changes. I wanted to be certain I was making a decision, and not a reaction. I should explain the joint card, because the joint card requires explanation if you want to understand how a person ends up funding a dinner they weren't invited to, and only finding out through a banking notification at 9:45 on a Tuesday night. My parents' names are Celestine and Emeka Achebi. They are 64 and 67 years old respectively, and they live in the house I grew up in, a 4-bedroom in a neighborhood called Delbrook that my father purchased in 1991 when he was working as a structural engineer at a firm called Meridian Group, and my mother was a part-time bookkeeper, and the mortgage payment was, by my father's account, aggressive but manageable. The mortgage was paid off in 2019. This matters because the paid-off mortgage is the reason the joint card arrangement started, which is a piece of logic that requires one more layer to make sense. My father retired from Meridian Group in 2020 at 63 on a pension that covered the house's fixed costs with approximately $600 to spare each month for everything else. My mother had stopped working in 2017 when her bookkeeping clients consolidated, and she decided, at 60, not to rebuild the practice. Her income at the time of my father's retirement was a Social Security payment of $1,147 a month. Their combined monthly income was enough for the house and the utilities and the car insurance and the groceries, and very little margin. I became aware of the margin problem gradually, the way you become aware of most structural problems in a family, through a series of small requests that each seemed reasonable in isolation and were only visible as a pattern when you stepped back far enough to see all of them at once. The first request was for help with a car repair in the spring of 2021. My father's car needed a new alternator and a belt replacement. The quote from their mechanic, a man named Darius Cole at a shop called Cole Automotive, was $847. My father mentioned this on a Sunday phone call, not as a request exactly. My father rarely made direct requests, but in the way he mentioned things he considered beyond his current capacity, which I had learned, over 32 years, to hear as a request. I transferred $847 the next day. The second request came 3 months later. My mother's dental insurance had lapsed with the end of her bookkeeping work, and she needed a crown. The cost was $1,340 out of pocket. She mentioned this on the same Sunday call pattern. I transferred $1,340. By the end of 2021, I had transferred approximately $4,200 to my parents for various shortfalls, car repairs, a plumbing issue, a gap in my father's prescription coverage before his Medicare supplement kicked in. Each transfer was a response to a specific stated need. None of them were acknowledged as a pattern. None of them were discussed as an arrangement. In January of 2022, I proposed the joint card as a way to simplify what had become a monthly exercise in transferring money in irregular amounts in response to irregular requests. I suggested a card with a monthly loaded balance of $800, enough to cover the kinds of gaps that kept coming up, loaded automatically from my checking account on the first of each month, with my parents as authorized users. My mother said that was very thoughtful. My father said it would make things easier. I set it up through my bank on a Thursday afternoon and mailed the cards the following week. The monthly load had started at $800. By the following year, it was $1,100 because the car insurance had come up once and the grocery costs had increased, and there had been a fence repair that was technically the neighbor's responsibility, but my father had handled unilaterally and I had covered without being asked. By the time of the banking notification, the card loaded at $1,300 a month, and my parents had been using it for 3 years and 2 months without once asking me whether the amount was working for me, or whether I had preferences about what it was used for, or whether I wanted to occasionally be included in the dinners it paid for. I worked as a radiologic technologist at a hospital called St. Ambrose Medical Center, a position I had held for 6 years. I was not wealthy. I was careful and consistent, the way my father had always described me, careful and consistent, with a tone that was approving and also faintly dismissive, the way you describe a reliable appliance. I had $31,000 in savings. I contributed to a retirement account. I had no debt other than my car, which had 14 months left on the loan. I was, in the terms my family used to categorize these things, fine. And being fine in my family's accounting meant being available. My brother Kwame was not fine in this framing, or had not been for several years, and this had translated into a sustained and specific quality of parental attention that I had watched from a particular angle for most of my adult life. Kwame was 35 and had spent the better part of his 30s moving through a sequence of ventures, a clothing line, a consulting practice, a period of real estate licensing, that had each begun with momentum and ended with a conversation at my parents' kitchen table that I was sometimes present for, and that always concluded with my father's hand on Kwame's shoulder and my mother's voice going soft in a way it rarely went soft in my direction. I did not resent Kwame. I want to be precise about this because the story could read as though I did, and that reading would be inaccurate. What I observed was a structural pattern. Kwame received my parents' visible emotional energy, and I received their practical reliance. He was the one they worried about openly. I was the one they counted on quietly. These were not the same thing, and I had understood from approximately the age of 24 that they were not going to become the same thing, and I had made my peace with that understanding in the particular way you make peace with something you've decided not to spend your energy fighting. What I had not made peace with, apparently, was the Tuesday night discovery that the card I loaded monthly had paid for a dinner at Terrazzo that included my grandmother, who had been too tired for visitors 2 weeks earlier when I had asked about coming by, and my Aunt Adiz, who lived 40 minutes away and had apparently not been too tired, and my brother Kwame, who had been at that table in a photo my mother had captioned "These people are everything without my name anywhere in it." I stood at my kitchen counter for a long time that night. I went to bed without making any changes. I woke up Wednesday morning and went to work and performed 8 radiographic exams and documented each one accurately and answered a question from a first-year radiology resident named Dr. Fatima Osei about contrast protocols and ate lunch in the break room and drove home. Wednesday evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and my bank's account management portal, and I looked at the joint card settings for 45 minutes without touching anything. I was working through a question, the way I worked through clinical questions, methodically without rushing the conclusion, making sure I understood what I was looking at before I decided what to do with it. The question was not whether to cancel the card. That had been decided somewhere between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. in the part of sleep that processes things you haven't finished processing while you're awake. The question was how to understand what the card had actually been and what the dinner had actually revealed about it. Here is what I arrived at. The card had been a solution to an administrative problem, the irregularity of requests, that had been accepted by my parents as a feature of the landscape rather than a gift from a specific person. Over 3 years and 2 months, I had loaded $1,300 a month, beginning at $800 and increasing as needs arose. The total was approximately $47,580. None of that had been discussed as a total. None of it had been acknowledged as a sustained effort. It had been used month after month, with the same naturalness with which you use a utility, not with ingratitude, exactly, but without the kind of attention that requires you to register the source. The dinner had not been a calculated cruelty. I was confident of that. My mother had not sat down and thought, Soleil funds our dinners, but we won't invite her to this one. What had happened was something more unremarkable and, in some ways, more clarifying. She had organized a dinner for the family members she thought of as requiring her attention at that moment: my grandmother's health, Kwame's current situation, Adi's visit, and I had not been in that category because I was fine, and fine people do not require gathering around. The card had been available. She had used it. She had posted the photo because she was happy and wanted to share it, and she had not noticed that the photo was a record of something. I understood all of this. I held it carefully, the way you hold a clinical finding that changes the picture without being the diagnosis you expected. And then, on Wednesday evening, I opened the account management portal and began. The card had 2 authorized users, my mother and my father. I could remove one or both, or I could close the card entirely, or I could change the monthly load to 0 and let the card sit active but empty. I considered each option for about 10 minutes. I changed the monthly load to 0. I left the card active. I sent a payment of $0 to the account to trigger a notification that the next load had been processed, which would, in normal operation, have been $1,300, and then I logged out. The 0 load would process on the 1st of the month, which was 9 days away. The card currently had a balance of $214.17. The remainder from this month's $1,300 after the terrazzo charge, and a grocery purchase I could see on the statement from 2 days earlier. That balance would spend down normally. On the 1st, nothing new would arrive. I did not call my parents that night. I did not send a message. I made dinner, answered 2 work emails, and called my friend Yawanda, who lives across town and who I had spoken to about my parents exactly twice in the previous year, and who I trusted, for that reason, to be honest rather than already opinionated. I told her what had happened. She listened. She said, "What do you want from this?" I said, "I want to stop funding something I'm not part of." She said, "That's clear." I said, "I know." We talked for another hour about other things. I went to bed. My father called on Thursday at 11:14 a.m. I was between patients at St. Ambrose. His call went to voicemail. His message said, "Soleil, it's Dad. There seems to be a problem with the card. I tried to use it at the pharmacy and it was declined. Give me a call when you get a chance." His voice was the same voice he used for logistical problems, a mild, contained register that I had heard him use for the alternator, for the plumbing issue, for every practical difficulty I could remember. Not alarmed. Informational. I called him back at my lunch break. "The card was declined at the pharmacy," he said. "I know," I said. "I changed the load." A pause. "What do you mean?" "I set the monthly load to 0. The card balance is spent down. There won't be a new load on the 1st. Another pause. My father's pauses had a particular quality. They were processing pauses, not performative ones. "I see," he said. "Can I ask why?" I had thought about this conversation since Wednesday evening, and I had decided I wanted to be direct without being accusatory. My father responded better to information than to indictment, and I respected that about him. "I saw the Instagram post from Tuesday night," I said. "The dinner at Tara's. I wasn't in the photo." The pause that followed was longer. "That was a last-minute thing," he said. "Your aunt was in town, and your grandmother wanted to see Kwame, and it came together quickly." "I understand," I said. "I'm not calling to discuss the dinner. I'm calling to let you know I've changed the card arrangement, and I wanted you to hear it from me directly.
Soleil.
His voice shifted, not to warmth, exactly, but to a register I recognized as his version of careful. The dinner wasn't meant as an exclusion. Your mother. Dad. I waited. I know it wasn't deliberate. That's actually not the point I'm making. Then what is the point? I had the answer ready because I had been working on it for 2 days. The point is that I've been loading that card for 3 years without once being included in a conversation about how it was going, or whether the amount was right, or whether anyone noticed. Tuesday night, I found out it paid for a dinner I wasn't at from a banking alert after seeing the photo on Instagram. I've made a decision about the arrangement based on that. A longer pause. That's a significant decision, he said. I know. Your mother's prescription refills. I know, I said. I'm sorry, that's going to require some adjustment. I think you'll find a way to manage it. The pause again. When he spoke, his voice had a quality I didn't hear from my father often, something between concession and recalibration. I didn't know you felt this way, he said. I know you didn't, I said. That's part of what I've been thinking about. We ended the call without resolution, which was honest. My father was not a man who made quick changes to his understanding of a situation. He would think about this for several days before arriving at any position. I respected that process even when it meant waiting for it. My mother called at 3:07 p.m. I was with a patient. Voicemail. At 4:45 I listened to it. Her voice was level but moving quickly, the way it moved when she was managing something and didn't want her management to show. She said there had been some confusion about the card, that she hoped I hadn't misunderstood anything about Tuesday, that the dinner had been a spontaneous gathering and she would have called, but it had come together so quickly and she hadn't wanted to bother me on a weeknight. She said to call her back. I called her back Thursday evening at 7. The pharmacy was declined, she said when she picked up. I know. I told Dad earlier. I changed the card load. Soleil, I need that card for the prescriptions. Your father's. Mom. I kept my voice even. I understand. I've made a decision about the arrangement. I wanted to call you directly, so you had the information. What decision? To cut us off. Her voice had sharpened, but in a controlled way. My mother was above most things controlled. Because of a dinner? Not because of the dinner, I said. Because of 3 years of using the card without a single conversation about how the arrangement was working. The dinner was the thing that made it visible. You never said anything, she said. How are we supposed to know you were keeping score? I sat with the word score for a moment. I wasn't keeping score, I said. I was paying a monthly bill for 3 years. Tuesday, I found out it paid for a dinner I wasn't invited to from an Instagram post. I made a decision. That's not fair, she said. You make it sound like we used you. I'm not saying you used me intentionally, I said. I'm saying the arrangement stopped working for me, and I've ended it. Her voice was careful now, recalibrated. What do you want from us? An apology? You want us to say we're sorry for having a family dinner? I don't want anything from you, I said. I've made a change to my own account. I'm telling you about it directly rather than letting you find out from the card. Your father's medication. Mom. I waited. I hope you'll find a way to manage it. You managed before the card existed. She was quiet for several seconds. Then, I don't understand who you've become. I considered this. I think I'm the same person I've always been, I said. I think the arrangement made me easier to not notice. The silence that followed was the longest of the call. When she spoke again, her voice had the particular flatness of someone who has decided to end a conversation rather than continue it. I'll talk to your father, she said. That sounds good, I said. I'll talk to you soon. I ended the call. I put my phone on the charger. I poured a glass of water and stood at my kitchen window for a few minutes, looking at the same dark outline of the building across the alley. 2 lit windows again. The same 2 or different ones, I couldn't tell. Then I went to the living room and sat on the couch and watched 40 minutes of a documentary about migratory bird navigation that I had been meaning to finish for 2 weeks. It was, as it turned out, very good. I finished it. I went to bed. Kwame called on Saturday. I answered because Kwame and I had a different relationship than the one I had with my parents, quieter, less structurally loaded. built on a sibling shorthand that I valued even when the surrounding family dynamics were complicated. He called at 10 a.m., which was early for him. "Mom called me," he said. I figured. "She said you canceled the card." "I changed the load to 0, I said. "The card's still active. There's just no money on it." A pause. "Because of Tuesday." "Because of 3 years," I said. Tuesday was when I noticed. He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know you weren't invited," he said. "I thought it was. I assumed Mom had called you." "She didn't." Another pause. "I'm sorry," he said. "I would have said something if I'd known." This was the thing about Kwame that I had always understood and never quite known how to account for in the larger family structure. He was, in direct conversation, a decent and perceptive person. The dynamic that had given him my parents' full visible attention had not made him careless about me. It had just made him, in the way of people who receive a lot of attention, occasionally unobservant about the people who were receiving less. "I know," I said. "It's not about you." "What's it about?" 3 years of a card that paid for things I wasn't part of and wasn't asked about and wasn't thanked for, I said. It added up to something I needed to address. Kwame was quiet for a long time. "How much?" he said finally. "Approximately $47,580, I said. "Over 3 years and 2 months. A longer silence.
Soleil.
"I know. They don't. Do they know that number?"
No.
"I haven't told them the total." He was quiet again. "What do you want to happen?" "Nothing specific," I said. I stopped the card. "I'm not asking for anything back. I just needed it to stop." "Okay," he said. And then, after another moment, "I'm going to talk to them." "You don't have to do that for me." "I'm going to do it anyway," he said. We ended the call more gently than I'd expected. Kwame did not apologize again, which I respected. One direct apology is more honest than a string of them. I appreciated the call. I didn't expect it to change very much, and I was right about that, and that was fine. My parents managed the prescription situation within the week. My father called his Medicare supplement provider, a representative named Gerald Whitmore, and discovered there was a mail-order pharmacy option through his plan that reduced his copay significantly, a detail he had apparently not investigated previously because the card had made it unnecessary to investigate. My mother called their primary care physician, Dr. Nena Adeyemi, who wrote a 90-day supply for the most expensive of the 3 medications, which reduced the per-month cost. They also, according to Kwame, had a conversation I was not present for in which my father told my mother the amount Kwame had told him. Kwame reported this to me 3 weeks later, during a phone call about something else entirely. In the particular sideways manner he delivered information he wasn't sure I wanted. "Dad knows the number," he said. He went quiet for about 5 minutes when I told him. I said, "Okay." Kwame said, "He didn't say anything bad. He just went quiet." I said, "That sounds like him." The Sunday calls with my parents resumed after a gap of 3 weeks. The first one was short and careful, 15 minutes, mostly about my grandmother's upcoming birthday, which was being planned more quietly than the terraza gathering, and which, my mother mentioned, she hoped I would be able to attend. I said I would.
I did.
My grandmother, who was turning 82 and who still moved through a room with the kind of efficiency that suggested she had never tolerated inefficiency in herself, sat beside me for most of the lunch and told me, in a private exchange while my mother was managing the cake, that she had asked to invite me to the Tuesday dinner and been told I was probably busy with work. I held that information for a moment. Then I said, "I'm glad you're here, Grandma." She said, "I'm always here. You should come more." I said I would try. The card was not restarted. My parents have not asked me to restart it, and I have not offered. The Sunday calls are different now, shorter in some respects, more specific, less shaped by the unspoken weight of an arrangement that sat beneath every conversation like something neither of us was naming. My mother and I talk about her garden, which she has expanded considerably this year. My father and I talk about the structural engineering news he still follows in his retirement, which I understand approximately half of and find genuinely interesting for the half I follow. We have not had a direct conversation about the card or the dinner or the $47,580. I don't know if we will. I do not consider this unfinished. Something's close without a formal conversation, the way a wound closes without anyone deciding it's time. What I know is that I am no longer funding something I was excluded from, and that my parents are managing, and that my grandmother wants me to come more, and that I intend to. I saved the $1,300 a month. By December, I had enough to take a trip I'd been postponing for 2 years, a week in a coastal city I'd always wanted to see, by myself, staying in a hotel with a good restaurant on the ground floor and a view of the water. I booked the trip on a Thursday evening from my kitchen table with my laptop open and a glass of wine beside it. It was, as far as evenings go, unremarkable. I liked it for exactly that reason. There is a kind of generosity that becomes invisible to the people receiving it, not because they're ungrateful, but because it's been consistent long enough to stop reading as a gift and start reading as a condition of the environment. Water pressure. Reliable internet. A card that loads on the 1st of every month. You don't thank the infrastructure. You use it. And when it stops, you notice the absence before you notice the source. What I wanted, at the end of all of it, wasn't a thank you, though one would have been honest. What I wanted was to stop being infrastructure and go back to being a person who makes choices about where her money goes, including toward her family, when she decides to. That's not a withdrawal of love. That's what love looks like when it's making its own decisions. If you were me, on that Tuesday night, the banking alert at 9:47, the Instagram post, the 7 faces at the table, at what point would you have acted? The next morning? That night? Or would you have waited, the way I did, until the decision had settled into something certain? Tell me in the comments. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one posts every week. Like this video if you've ever been someone's infrastructure. And if someone you know needs to hear this, share it with them today. I'll see you next week.